Ahrens, extremely proud to always have an opportunity to speak with you. I learn from you every time I read anything you post, anything that you give an interview about. We unfortunately are, at such a distance within many time zones that sometimes it's difficult to stay in touch more frequently. So I really appreciate that you found the time. I know it's evening time where you are now, and I know that nonetheless you're no less busy even in the evening. So thank you for making time. We'll try to make it concise. So the way we decided to do this was we're going to look at three things: masks, violence, election. Yep. Obviously with the US focus, I know that all of us in the community have multiple concerns about what is happening now in the country, what is kind of where we're headed, because we have a lot of different things, a lot of moving parts, political, social, economic. And why don't you give me your, let's say, 2-3 minute overview of where you think we are and where do you feel security practitioners should be really focused on in order to protect those whom they advise?
What a loaded question. Well, first, I want to echo the same comments to you. I always have time for Ilya. I'm actually glad you don't live in the States, because if you did, I wouldn't get any work done because we'd be talking all the time. So, drinking beer by the fireside, we'd have many fireside chats. So always appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you in any regard. To your comment, synopsize 2 to 3 minutes. We are failing the apocalyptic setting on easy. And I mean, literally, you look at across the board, people are reacting. We have emergency management programs that are all about preparedness and being proactive. And we just kind of like said that and threw that out the window and said, everybody needs thermal cameras. Are we going to put thermal cameras in immediately? Yeah. Put those in, take care of that. Everybody has to, everywhere wear masks, everywhere wear masks. And the bank teller is basically like, people are coming in with sunglasses and masks, and I don't feel good about that. What do I do? Oh no, it's okay. We're stopping COVID. Move forward, light speed. And even if you look at some of the vaccine trials, we're using the words warp speed, right? It's just bad. It's just bad. We're not proactively looking. We're not thinking about the after effects. Everything from pushing everybody at home when they might have the potential for intimate partner violence. We're not thinking about the aspect of what the mask does when I see another human. I mean, when I'm talking to you, I'm using my hands. I got the whole Italian thing going on, but my facial expressions say so much. And when I'm doing this, basically you're seeing half of my face. You just see in my eyes, normally with the Frau in front of me, you just have people look at me, well, yeah, that guy's a jerk. No, it's just because I'm squinting looking at the monitor 24 hours. But we are in my opinion, we are dehumanizing people with the use of this mask, which is now leading to aspects of workplace violence that we've seen. And these are all potential outcomes that we could have avoided. So I really think we've been very reactive. I wish we could take a step back and be proactive and do what we talked about in that article, Ilya, tabletops. We should be tabletop in this and thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to tell them they can't come in the building. Okay, well, interject. He owns 4 floors in the building. What do we do with that? Well, we're going to tackle him. No, probably don't want to tackle them, right? I think tabletops would have been an excellent exercise to prepare organizations and individuals for the state that we're in. And I believe we're going to continue to be in this state for the next 2 to 3 years. Now, there's other impacts that people aren't talking about. One, we've got defunding the police. So what's the first thing that the police are going to do? They're going to get rid of all the training. They're going to get rid of the special programs, SEPTED officers, the law enforcement walkthroughs to see if, what they would do during an armed assailant. All that stuff's going to go away. Moreover, The good cops are leaving the force because they don't want to be killed. And the ones that are propensity to violence are staying because they don't really have any other outcomes other than staying with the police force and engaging with the pension and what have you.
Sure.
Also, I think another challenge that we have is we're not looking at suicide rates. There's suicide rates with people inside. People need to have collaboration with individuals. Some people can't do it, right? They need to have that, connection. Or what do we do during a termination? I sat on calls, which I was just unbelievable. Like, we're going to terminate all these people. Well, what about their computers? Yeah, what about their computers? What do you don't have this planned out? Are you going to get the computer back? Oh, we can just write the computer off. We're going to lock their computer, though, right after the termination call. What if they're in the middle of a personal memo, Oh, yeah, well, how should we handle that? I feel like I'm the person in the background just kind of saying, yeah, there's a curb there. And if you ride the bike, you might fall down. So I mean, we could just keep elaborating, but that's kind of like my synopsis is reactive. We need to get back to that proactive response. And for security managers, we need to start thinking about adapting. We need to understand what our crime influences are going to be, start and use big data to make decisions, informative decisions, because the budget crunch is coming.
Thank you. I can only add here that you mentioned warp speed. What a lot of people forget is that you can still align with very fast-paced environments in a thoughtful manner. It doesn't mean that you have to be disassociated, that these two things have to be disassociated, moving fast and thinking carefully, right? So like you said, a tabletop exercise or let's say the what if process, right? Similar to root cause analysis, right? So you continually poke holes in your planning. And I think that these things can be facilitated so well that they actually help save a ton of time and save a lot of mistakes down the road. How do you think, you're saying that we're failing in that, and I agree with you, and I see this all over the place, even though a lot of enterprises, smaller scale, larger scale, they're saying, oh, we're trying to be resilient, we're building these systems and practices, and yet you see recurring incidents. Oh, they forgot the supply chain. Oh, they didn't get the people in time, or whatever, right? And so what do you think we can do to like become more thoughtful? Where does that like, I don't know, switch in behavior come? Who would be the person leading the way, both for us as practitioners and also for our organizations? Like, whom do we need to look to solve this huge problem?
I think it really ties to the ESRM process or, the ERM process. But ultimately, you need to have that connect. There is no better reason to have a connection with upper management, a good solid connection, because you can go into the CEO, you're not going over any lines and say, hey, Bob, listen, we need to talk, right? And I think to some degree, some of our security leaders have this mindset, but are kind of like, I don't know if I want to stop the train here, pull the emergency brake. That might not look so good for me, right? And so, in some of these aspects, that top-down commitment, being able to have that conversation at the board level, I think there's a lot of really intelligent people like you and I out there, and we're paid, we're consultants, right? So we report directly to the CEO. And what do we say? We say, well, you need to have an ERM, you need to have, identify your critical assets, and then they bring that downstream. These security managers and these security directors are not idiots, but they're not empowered to do that. And I think really fostering that opportunity is going to be important. In my article, Adapt or Die, I suggested, let's get rid of the word security. Because when we think of word security, it's just like, the guard with his feet up on the chair and just hanging out. I'm suggesting a proactive term, resilience. the chief resilience officer, or whatever we want to call that. We got to get chief risk officer now, CRO, but something along those lines that talks about the proactive aspect. I believe if I went to the CEO as a chief resiliency officer, I'm presenting a much different message about return on investment as opposed to the security director. Security director describes to me reactive. I'm waiting for the police. I'm waiting for the phone call. Resilience is I'm in front of it. I'm trying to stop things before they even ever happen.
Yep. And I like I definitely support the concept of resilience because that's the name of the practice that I have now. So totally, I couldn't agree more.
You can send the check to me. That's Sean
Absolutely.
Ahrens for the predefined amount.
We will discuss that offline. My view is that as organizations are grappling with this fast-paced set of crises, because it's not just one crisis,
right.
It's a set of crises that unfortunately come sometimes completely unexpected for most organizations that don't have enough resources to even look outside. Geez, I'm looking now at some clients that don't even have the basics of human intelligence for their enterprises. They don't go out to the community. They don't, even monitor social media. They don't go and interact with their peer groups, peer organizations, to a degree that's necessary. And here we are in this multi-crisis environment. My concern is to go and say, okay, well, let's set up, let's try to follow the ESRM process. How do you think, what is the simplest way that we can communicate what an ESRM process is? Because first of all, for some people, the ESRM or ERM is kind of an innocuous term. They don't understand how to fit that into their organization if they don't already have it. So do you think, and let me just suggest to you what I see kind of being practiced, and perhaps tell me where I'm wrong or what else could be added to it. What I see today is if I'm able to at least get in the door with the C-suite, one of the most meaningful ways in which I can describe to them what is taking place and how I can assist, how the organization needs to change, what types of measures we need to start deploying, is I look at, I guess, three things. First is business objectives. And I say, I completely respect the fact that you need to continue to be this organization, this brand, whatever it is that you guys are doing, you're producing some output for the benefit of your customers. Fine. So those business objectives, be better, have better liquidity, let's say in 5 years, expand into different markets, in the next 3 years, acquire, blah, blah, blah. So that's business objectives. Then my next question will be, okay, what mission critical assets exist today if I were to take one or several of them offline? It could be humans, it could be technology, whatever. If I were to take some of those offline, what kind of negative input or negative impact it would have on your business objectives? Would you still be able to meet them? And then thirdly is to have a conversation in dollars and cents. So
that's it.
The impact of this to your business objectives costs you ABC. Okay, where am I wrong? What's missing? Can you please help me?
I love it. I think the one thing I was going to correct you on, and I was being naive and thinking that you wouldn't have captured this, is the dollars and cents. So many people, like they'll put like, this is catastrophic, and this is a moderate disaster, and this is normal, and this is minor, and all these things, and they capture it with a narrative, right? And it's a good way to kind of have someone have a gut reaction. But if you could actually put dollars around something like, this is the hard cost that we know about, we can't even fathom what the indirect costs are going to be as a result, like say workplace violence or something along those lines. But this is the hard cost we know, right? And here's the indirect cost. It's so much more powerful to a CEO or a C-suite. Again, I think that is the right the right discussions that we need to have. The only there was one other augmentation that I might address, which would be, and also dollars, understanding the risks. So we're going to move into Brazil. How many times do I talk to organizations? We're opening an office in Brazil. Wonderful. Do you have a travel advisory program? Why? Okay. And then next week, we're going to continue that. And we're going to move into Mexico. Okay. Maybe you want to consider the travel advisory program.
Yeah.
What's that? Why do we need it? Okay. And so you have to have this dialogue, and now I'm producing articles for MOSAC and what have you. And it's not necessary when you go through an ESRM, like, well, there's a high level of K&R potential there. I think there's another element though, too. With ESRM and ERM, I have seen one big conflict, right? So you got your chief risk officer, he's carrying the ERM process. Security kind of jumped onto the ESRM because that's how we add value. But they're really parallel paths.
Yeah.
And it almost kind of makes the chief risk officer kind of like, what are you doing over there? That's my deal, right? Ultimately, it is. And I think that there's to be a more partnership with risk manager like HR. I've submitted that there is no other position in an organization like a chief security officer. He's part janitorial. He's emergency management. He's HR. He's legal. He potentially, she could even be tied into risk, forming on those. Business continuity. We wear so many different hats, and the potential for us having input into those risk decisions is significant.
It's interesting you bring this up, and notice how it seems to me each of us has just been able to very concisely paint a picture of how to identify a risk and how to, let's say, apply some quantification to it, and how to deliver that being aligned with, let's say, organization's business objectives. Okay, so I'm timing us, right? So we're talking for like the last, 15, 20 minutes, just, kind of getting our thoughts together. Imagine, right, if we could take the same 20 minutes or half an hour, right, to have that same conversation at the C-suite level, okay?
Right.
Now, this is where I have a big concern, is that people are assuming that when you add this ESRM or ERM to the mix, people say, oh, well, that's such a protracted process. We'll never have the time to practice it. We don't have resources. Well, two guys, one in Hong Kong, one in Chicago, are talking for 20 minutes. And all we need is just somebody's issue, somebody's specific enterprise, and we can already get you to the point where you can start solving your problems. 20 minutes. Okay, and this is where I find I like the idea of partnership, but I also like a partnership between the chief security officer and chief risk officer. What I also like is that in most organizations, yes, we can see silos, we could see kind of different functional roles or separation of different operations, let's say. Nonetheless, right, if senior management acquiesces and says, well, we're all in this together at the end of the day, it's the enterprise, right? It doesn't matter whether you sit in this silo or the other silo, right? If we wait for another 2 months, we're dead in the water, okay? So why are we all just kind of running to our own corners? So if the senior management, this is the critical point in my view, the senior management creates and fosters a platform where different people from different functions are able to come together and in the same format that you and I are talking, just put some issues on the table and say, okay, just remembering what the mission critical assets are, how we quantify the impact scenario in dollars and cents, and how that hurts our business objectives. I think in an hour's time, you can have a fairly solid program that says, okay, we know for the next several months what we need to be doing because this is exposed, and this is exposed. There's so much money we're going to lose on it. Just you don't have to be precise with the dollars. This is the part that people don't understand. How much does it cost to hire a PR consultancy to get you out of a reputation crisis? Okay, how much does it cost? You can run that approximate retainer value, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can say, okay, it's going to cost me $100,000 to start, okay, to just get the contract signed, right? $100,000. That's already the starting point at which you're starting to lose money because you're hiring them to get you out of a situation. So, and those dollars and cents could be added on as you lose technology, as you need to hire third parties, and so on and so forth. So I feel that you're absolutely right, that majority of those issues we're talking about, how masks are affecting our enterprises and how just generally going back to work affects our enterprises and what kinds of issues we might see, how social violence will continue. Unfortunately, we're seeing that, how lack of police response will further degrade our ability to safely operate, be it in a small town's office park or in a major city, right? So with knowing how those three things could affect our lives, right, and our enterprises, an hour's time spent discussing across all functions, incorporating those three elements. What are the mission critical assets? How much money are we going to lose from different scenarios? And how does that hurt our business objectives? I submit to you that if we were to open that conversation up a little bit more broadly, just outside of the chief security officer or chief risk officer, and try to collaborate across the board with different functions because they know their operations very well and also the expenses. It would be such a useful undertaking. And even if you do, let's say you're not able to get everybody to the table, you're able to get 5 functions to the table. That would be still a major win for an organization, just in terms of understanding what the future lies, like what future they will have in the next, let's say, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. So what do you think about that?
I totally agree. So, I mean, what we're talking about is like a poll meeting or a whiteboard meeting, and we're putting issues up on a board. It's a 1 hour investment of your time. And from that, we get actionable steps off of our foundation. We know our foundation, and then we can build on that as a plan, right? How do you win every football game? You got to have a plan. Good example of this is I'm working with a client right now, workplace violence assessment. We're doing this, and they are a parent company that have all these satellite companies. They let them kind of operate with their own P&L, but they have these shared resources that they use. So they use a shared legal department. They use a shared risk control, risk management department, and then a safety department. It's all shared under the parent entity. And so I'm talking to these small independent entities because they identified workplace violence as an ERM process. They're going through this right now, just like you just described. And I'm uncovering issues like, for instance, think about this. I said, you have an incident, you have to get a hold of the risk manager to find out policies. How do you do that? Well, that's handled by our corporate entity. Okay, well, how do you action the policy? How do you get the K&R going? How do you address this? How do you address your recovery, your counseling, all that? Well, our corporate entity handles that. Okay, well, how do you get a hold of the corporate entity? And they look at each other and they're like, how do we do that? Because they're not on they're on a separate exchange system. So they don't have, in this digital age, they don't have those contacts. And so it's broader than workplace violence. That one finding, that addresses fire, flood, all these other, even technical risks. And it's a big issue that's easily corrected, but we're identifying as this assessment process. And the same thing can be done in that poll thing. Well, how do we do this? How do we act this? And then we start engaging on that. So I totally agree.
Let me just also add to what you're saying is again, a simple war story. working with a client, they actually went ahead and paid one of the big fours to create playbooks. I mean, okay,
Yep.
so from professional perspective, I'm a big fan of playbooks, but there's a good playbook, and there's a terrible playbook.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm talking to the client. Even before I received the materials to read, I asked them, okay, so to what extent do you currently use them? The client says, we don't.
Right. Check the box.
You can stop right there. When
Yep.
when the client team is telling me that they have a resource, but that resource is not being used, several things have failed. Number one, the consultant who wrote the damn thing failed. And whatever money they got paid, it went to waste. Secondly, the client has failed to try to adapt those playbooks for their real environment. Just to the point that you said, there will be a failure point if you don't ask questions through the entire chain of actions, right? If you haven't worked that out, if you haven't looked at the entire process, who does what, who's designated
Right.
to pick up the phone and make a call, whatever, and how are you going to make a call if, let's say, there is no connection? What's your alternative? If you haven't broken down that process and looked at every step, you're failing, because you're not going to know when the real situation occurs where that failure may be, and you're going to be in even more panic trying to resolve it. And so when they responded to me that they don't use those playbooks, it actually made me take a step back, and I was pretty sad, because number one, they're a very sophisticated organization. I found them to be one of the most transparently operating clients that I've worked with. I love their team. Okay, I've had a chance now to interview all of their senior execs. Amazing collaboration. Okay, so I thought all the groundwork for having to do things correctly has been laid. It's right there. It's right in front of them, right? They're able to talk across the aisle. They're able to cooperate. There's very little ego, if any. And yet, you had a consultant who's written something, who left them hanging without having to validate how those documents, how those resources could be useful to the client. And we can't assume that every client is going to be very knowledgeable about things like you said, ESRM, right? How do you actually teach them? How do you enable them to get past the acronyms? How do you make them understand how that can work in reality, and what level of effort it requires to actually adapt a process, right? And I wholeheartedly agree that if we create a frame of mind, framework for how we think about crises, how we think about resilience, that's useful. But the same client, just to finish off on this war story, the same client, when I presented them with some, we were writing the ERM framework for them or whatever, they also told me, Ilya, don't forget, I also need to know what to do on a daily basis. Like, what actions do I need to take? Yeah, what meetings do I need to have? What agendas do I need to have? And you know what? At first, I said, oh, I'm babysitting again, right? But then I said, there's just nobody taught them. They don't understand. If I were to leave them hanging and just walk off, collect my paycheck, and just go, they will not understand how to take what I've created, which is, by my account, it's been proven to be useful. It's a good approach, not because I created it, but just because I've seen it work time and time again. But they have a gap in the ability to adopt the process.
Yep.
And the one thing that we really needed was to simply add a few slides to our PowerPoint report, right? To enable them to understand how to behave, what meetings to schedule, whom to talk to, what issues to discuss on a daily basis. And that got us across the hump. They now are in the process of implementing it, and they understand who needs to be involved, who they need to talk to, what they need to discuss, what the output should be. And then they have the process of talking to executives as well. Because again, transparent organization, not a problem. They just don't understand how to run it. Okay, once we were able to demonstrate it to them, that's it. We've unveiled the whole process.
You know, I think that's absolutely right. It's almost like we're learning things again that, you know, we have known for a long time. You know, it's like the adage, you know, you can feed a man for a day, or you can teach him to catch fish, or teach him how to grow
Yeah.
crops, or what have you, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I echo that. I've seen that. I mean, we saw that with the disaster on the oil field in the sea with the BPV, the blowout preventer, where
Yeah.
they actioned their emergency plan finally, and the people that were on the plan were dead. Like the guy that was the expert on the BPV valve, he was dead, and they couldn't get a hold of other people. And that is time. You
Yeah.
know, who knows what the outcome would have been. I mean, when I was talking with my client about the workplace violence, I said to him, well, workplace violence, you know, or what do you do for a public information officer? That comes from corporate. We have a
Yeah.
directive that we are not supposed to communicate to the media. The media is on site right now.
Yep.
And what are you going to tell them? No comment. And I said, so what's your plan? Well, we got to get a hold of the public information officer and they'll make a comment. They're not even associated to the company. They don't
Yep.
even know what's going on. And so I said, just building basic media scripts and actioning those media scripts would be extremely beneficial. And I
Sure.
think even if we did one emergency preparedness thing every 5-10 years, as long as someone is involved in that process and that core team, they're going to know, they're going to have the synopsis of what to do. They're not going to run around, and we're going to be, you know, fighting time more efficiently than if without that training.
And let me also add to something that you said before. I should have picked up on it, but this issue of defunding law enforcement, it's no secret that we all, as practitioners, and our industry has benefited from people who transition from the public sector, law enforcement, into our industry. Many of them have still, you know, a lot of things to learn. Granted, fine. But a lot of people have this misconception about what law enforcement is. And as any organization, there will be beneficial things that they do, and there will be things that need to be corrected. But if you simply suck the funding out of those organizations, like you said, what's going to happen is all it's going to do is instill fear, inability to act, and it's also going to remove the things we do need, which is training, which is, why did this SOP fail? How can we correct it? We need to change our behavior. What do you think is going to happen if we stop funding those efforts? I mean, the first thing that came to my mind when I heard that, oh yeah, these efforts to defund police, I said, okay, what's going to happen to police academies? Okay, this is my grassroots education platform that I can enable change for the next generation of police officers, right? If you're telling me you're going to drop funding from those organizations, right, and also disincentivize the young individual who wants to become a cop, but now sees such turmoil in that sector, so that they are disincentivized to even join it, right? What are we talking about? How are we going to survive? And how are we going to maintain the rule of law? Now, having said all this, without going too deeply into political affiliations or views, my affiliation is with rationality. I don't care what party we belong to, okay? We all, I think, agree that rule of law helps run the country, okay? Helps run the social order, helps facilitate the safety and existence of our families, okay? Am I going to be happy letting my kids out on the street if there's no police response and I know that there isn't one, right? So think about that. So my point was that I remember having taught law enforcement officers, having studied together with them at a university, and I can say that they're just like everyone else who could be producing tremendous benefit for society if they were taught correctly, if they were given a platform. But if you're defunding, if you're thinking of defunding and not giving the next generation of police officers and the current generation to look at the mistakes, change them, and fix behaviors, change operational practices, change the way they interact with the members of society, we're not headed in the right direction, okay? And I'm a big believer in not being so pretentious as to think that you don't make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Even when we say that this is a systemic mistake, okay, fine, okay, but we have those systemic issues in various industries. It's not just law enforcement, okay? So my point is, you drop funding from police departments, police organizations, that immediately cuts off the ability to make a change, immediately, right away. And the most sad part is that stifles new talent, that stifles the ability to educate properly and to change how new cops are being brought into the force and into the social, to maintain social order. And it makes the whole situation far more critical and far more detrimental for the society. So I just wanted to say my piece on that. I know that I think a lot of people are having thoughts about this. I feel that as any platform that starts with education, because police is no different, okay? If you defund it, please be mindful that you're also taking away funding from the ability of making a positive change.
The people making these decisions are not on the front lines, and that's the challenge. Like, so I mean, another reactive thinking, so at the height of some of these social unrests, Minneapolis made a decision that they were going to abolish the police department. They're going to move to something different. Yeah. And I remember seeing a news recording where they were asking the council person or what have you, and they said, so what are you going to do when you call 911? And the council person paused for a moment and said, well, there's obviously some things that we have to work out. There's obviously some things that you have to work out. You probably want to work those things out before you make a decision like you're making. And that's the reactive thinking that we're in. I see challenges ahead of us. So what we saw, back with the LA riots, 15, 20 years, and the move to community policing, awesome, right? The Robert Peel type of policing, very visible, community relations, officers, identifying informants and, having a rapport. People trusted the police. And now you can look at Americanized policing and it's becoming militarized. The cars are becoming black. You can't see them. And it's not because they're moving towards military function. One, they want to present an image of force. They're kind of tying it into their continuum. Two, they're changing the colors of the car so they can catch people. You don't see them. So we're going backwards. We know that community policing works, but for community policing to work, you need to have money. Yeah. Moreover, the change to social workers in an intimate partner violence, more cops are killed in an intimate partner violence exchange domestically than in any other call for service. We are going to see a social worker be killed in the future when they can't de-escalate the incident. Subsequent to that, with these, assassination of law enforcement officers, departments that are 1-car patrol right now are going to become 2-car patrol. What does that mean? That means it cuts down our patrols. That means that we have less area that we can actively monitor and manage, which is going to promote criminal acts because you're going to see cops less often. So this is kind of what we were talking about beforehand. This is some of the things, like these ESRM things need to start thinking about. What are we going to do about RIF? What are we going to do about the lack of law enforcement? And I submit that organizations now than ever need to really start thinking about their resiliency plans. They need to start considering doing threat assessments, hire you, me, whatever, or going through a security director and really analyzing their security exposures, because things are not going to get better in the short term. Yeah. I'm hopeful at some point someone will say, hey, I want to adopt a community policing program, but I don't see that. And I think that organizations are going to be charged with their own security more than ever before.
That's a very, very important point that you're raising that should make organizations that may not have been investing in, let's call it security, right, or protection function, because at least in American context, I see reduction of ability by law enforcement to act quickly and escalation of incidents. So just think about that issue, right? Reduction of ability to respond and escalation of incidents. Now, I don't care what kinds of incidents you're going to have. There will, as they escalate, as the number escalates, just the scaling up, right? There will definitely be an increase in incidents that require immediate frontline response. Okay, where you can get it. And so it's interesting you brought up that comment about a council member saying that we're going to work that out, right? This attitude is what's causing not only first huge incidents for organizations, but it's also causing repeated incidents for organizations. And when they all try to jump on this bandwagon of superficial resilience, when they say, oh yeah, we take these things very seriously. I love hearing that statement because it's so shallow that if I were to say, well, let me lift the rug a little bit. Let me see whether you can deliver on your promise. If you're saying, oh, we take this very seriously, right? You taking it very seriously doesn't mean anything if I see that your processes are broken, right? And so to your point, I think we're going to see the need for more robust protection programs that are native to each organization. We're going to see the need for cross-functional, call it ESRM or ERM application, thinking about mission critical assets, thinking about quantification of impact, and then thinking about how that affects business objectives. We're going to see the need for partnership within each organization and not having the ability to bring external resources with such luxury. First of all, because a lot of organizations are having financial crunch, particularly in the States. Secondly, because again, we're seeing that law enforcement is either extremely busy if they're competent, or they're just not able to accommodate everybody, right? And that's been the story even in normal times, but look at where we are now. And so last thing I want to ask you about, while again, I agree with pretty much what you said, we, I think, are aligned in terms of what risk management can achieve in organizations. What do you think is this issue with upcoming elections going to bring to us? What's going to happen on top as this extra layer of concern, of risk to different organizations?
Okay, so thanks for not making it a political conversation. So here we are, we're heading the elections. There are strong views on either side. Certainly, I think that emotions is extremely high. Really, as a whole, the United States need to de-escalate, like significantly. And there are groups that are, making these demonstrations, and there's an abundance of these groups on both sides. And some are becoming quasi-violent, and some are passive. The challenge that we have in front of us, I strongly believe, I've been looking at gun sales. You look at gun sales in the United States, you can't buy guns or ammo pretty much anywhere. I went over, I was going to pick up some 45 caliber. I'm a gun owner, and just, cause I'm going to go shooting with my son at some point. I wanted to get some reloads. Nope. When are you going to get them? Oh, don't think so. Online, you can't buy them. You can't. Weapons. I've always wanted a Tavor Israeli arms rifle, long rifle. I always wanted, and he's like 6-7 months, maybe, like 6-7 months.
Yeah.
There are no. So we have, everybody is armed out there now. We have these protests that people are going. I mean, I see people walking around with long rifles with their muzzles pointed down. They're not raising them, but I mean, they're not getting the training law enforcement's getting, right? So we have an opportunity for a blue on blue event with a whole bunch of people with weapons that could become a mass shooting beyond anything we've ever seen ever. Everybody like the OK Corral, basically.
And it's funny.
Yeah.
Let me just for a second. The thought came to me. If people think that a Democrat with a gun is different from a Republican with a gun, you need to take a step back and think. Okay, we all are
Yes.
human at the end of the day. Our impulses are not dependent on our political affiliations. So please go on.
That's absolutely right. So emotions, right? The first
Yeah.
thing that we want from a workplace violence is to separate someone from a potential weapon. We want to give them that time to cool down. We don't want the heat of the moment. You're out in a protest, someone says something, you get angry, you lose it, and basically we become insane for all intents and purposes. I mean, that we've seen that with the continuum of violence, right? Put the implement into them, you're just asking for a really bad scenario. Now, with this election, though, what I think is extremely problematic is there's one side of the aisle that is moving, in a certain direction, and they have the potential for violent tendencies, and we got another side that's brewing.
Mm.
And whichever side you look at, you've got those individuals. They've got tendencies for violence or brewing, right? And the media basically describes what those political affiliations are. I think we have the potential for a match being struck either way.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you which political affiliation is going to be worse or better at the elections. I really believe we are going to have social unrest unlike we've never seen before, depending on which way the pendulum flows on this, and also how much of the political party is eroded. So, if they lose the House Senate or the Senate House and with the president, I think those all come into impacts. Not in a position to identify which way. I am in a position to say organizations that have not considered shatter resistant film and that are in Class X cities might be a time to do it.
Yeah.
Individuals that are downtown and there's only one way out of the office building may not want to be downtown during those times. I think we're going to see something unrivaled beyond. And I hope to God I'm wrong.
On that note, I promised that we'd make it concise. We all have busy lives, and I really appreciate that you took the time out of your evening to share your opinions, your thoughts. I am learning from you every time, and just in the interest of full disclosure, people who may observe how we interact on social media, you and I, they will understand that sometimes we have points of disagreement. Okay, we don't agree on every single bit of professional things or political things and so on. I get that, but I'm very fortunate to have you as a friend. Very fortunate to see that neither one of us is losing the sense of civility. That neither one of us is really is being incentivized by the fast pace of news, and that we're still keeping our cool heads, kind of pretty much 24 hours if possible, right? But I really wish that the rest of community, professionals in our industry, people who listen to this outside of the industry, really take a step back and allow themselves a little bit of time to process their thoughts without getting angry, without being aggravated, without spilling this out to others, to really understand that it's not about political affiliations. It's not about who trusts somebody or who agrees or disagrees. It really is about our own emotions. And like you said, it's very easy to light a match and for a big swathe of society to fall into a trap of violence. I think that security practitioners, those that are affiliated with our industry, have an uphill battle at this point. And I think the more you're able to think rationally, the more you're able to tamp down your emotional position, but also think about it critically and think about it with cooler demeanor, and collaborate with people from either within your organization and with your peers, I think it will be very helpful, and I think that will help prevent very significant problems. So I want to thank you, Sean Ahrens, for being available, for speaking with me, for teaching me as always, and I really, really hope that you and your family stay safe.
You as well, and I'll just echo exactly what you've said. I think the challenge that we have is that we are no longer having dialogues. They're emotionally filled, and you and I, we've had discussions. We've seen either point of view, if we swayed it or didn't sway it, but I think that's the key thing. We take in the information. Okay, oh, I see that. And when we stop doing that and we lock it down only because of an emotional drive, that's our challenge. And I'm hoping that others can have similar dialogues, put the stuff to the side, and it could be anything. Save the whales, climate, whatever. Take the thoughts in, process them, be intellectual and not emotional about your discussions. And if the other side is becoming emotional, do what I've done. Is like, I can see you're very passionate about this topic. I say we just conclude the discussion.
Yeah.
Be the bigger man or the bigger woman.
Yeah, and you know what? If nothing else, I mean, my wife is an educator. We're very committed to the school environment, school community here. And one thing that strikes me pretty much every day as I listen to the news is, what do I want to model to my children?
That's right.
So this is something that I feel is crucially important. A lot of people forget, what are we going to model to our children? What do I want my kids to see? So on that note, it's a privilege as always. Thank you.
Always great talking to you. I enjoy the dialogue. I hope other people get something out of this as well. And they should definitely check out your website, Sphere State. I think you got something there, my friend. I think that's going to be something that people are going to be seeking in the near future, especially with some of the challenges ahead of us. Like, what's going to happen when all this economic stimulus runs out? We got another ripple in the lake that we have to think about.
For sure. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks so much. And I can only echo that you're doing fantastic work out there and really supporting a lot of people in the community and beyond. And those of them who are your clients, I hope they recognize the quality of professional advice that they're getting. I think that they're really working with one of the best professionals in the business. So thanks again. Stay safe, and we'll continue this soon.